A new year means a ton of new Lego, so it's time to take the hour-and-a-half trip up to the Lego store. I hopped in my car at 7:30 in the morning. I was dropped outside as my girlfriend didn't want to make the 2-hour wait in the queue, and I walked my way over to the store. Getting there, I was the first one to arrive, but as time went on, more Lego fans joined me, and definitely made the time go quicker. Finally, 11 o'clock rolled around, and we headed into the Lego store. I grabbed what I needed, and headed home. If you want to see the full haul video, that won't be what we're going over today. You can go check that one out just up here. But of course, we managed to get all of the Lego Star Wars sets, and we're going to be going through and reviewing them all in one video right here today. So let's get started. So believe it or not, this is my first ever microfighter, and I can't really say I've got too high hopes, but this is set number 75344, the Slave 1 or Boba Fett Starfighter microfighter, with 85 pieces retailing for $9.99. Now the build process was pretty simple, but still managed to include a couple of nice techniques, some really cool different curved pieces at the front to create that iconic Slave 1 shape. And I've got to say, this set genuinely blew me away with the quality for a tiny little microfighter set. I really like the way it can stand up as if it's in flight mode, or be posed lying down like it's landed. Overall, it was genuinely a pleasant build experience, and I've got to say, it's probably worth picking up, especially if you don't have one of those Boba Fett minifigures. Speaking of which, this Boba Fett minifigure is just the same as you will have seen in the recent Boba Fett's Palace set. Sadly, the helmet and jetpack are still slightly discolored. These are in Boba Fett's more classic sand green color, whereas the body is printed in the newer sort of recolored version as we see in Mando. It's a shame these don't match, but honestly, it's not the worst figure in the world. This one doesn't actually come with any sort of rangefinder, which is unusual for Boba Fett, but otherwise a really nice print on the torso and legs, and the head is fantastic as well. It's just a shame about the helmet and jetpack. Obviously, the one feature is that you can pose Boba Fett nice and simply into the cockpit, and there's a couple of flick fire missiles at the bottom as well. But for such a small set, it genuinely captures the iconic shape of the Slave 1 pretty well, and if I had to describe it in one word, it would be decent. Nowhere near the worst microfighter set ever. Brickheads, on the other hand, you know exactly what you're going to get when you build one of those. And although the Tusken Raider is well built, and honestly was something fresh for me as I haven't built one in years, it was still pretty basic, and pretty much every brickhead follows a similar formula of building up the central section with snot bricks around the outside, and then covering it with whatever details you need on the outside. With that being said, that doesn't take away from how good this brickhead looks. I honestly think it does the job really well. I'm just not a huge brickhead fan. Nevertheless, it's a great parts pack anyway, as it comes with a ton of tan pieces, some nice printed pieces around the belt, as well as some cool dark tan pieces on the actual head. I think they did the robes well on the lower body. The face is done honestly perfectly, and the shaping of the head with all the curved slopes and those cool horns sticking out the top look really good. But at the end of the day, a brickhead's a brickhead. I can't say I had a too strong opinion going into that set. However, this one right here, I definitely had a strong opinion on. And I'm pretty happy to say that I think my opinion has changed. So when we first heard a bit more about this set right here, I was like, do we really need another 501st battle pack? Is it really necessary? Are Lego just trying to capitalize on what they did before? And especially seeing some of the controversy that came out around this set with some of the false advertising, some of the weird helmets that are being used and stuff like that, I was really like, am I gonna like this set? But now that I've got it in hand and I've seen other people army building it and stuff like that, I'm really starting to like this set. There's definitely a couple things we'll touch on in the build that I'm not a big fan of, but I've got to say the minifigs are pretty decent and will be pretty nice in my 501st army. The build's just a classic battle pack build, although I would say it's on the top end of the sort of battle pack quality builds. There's some useful pieces if you're planning to part this out, such as some nice curved slopes and stuff like that. However, looking at the actual build itself, I'm not too sure about how much I like the turret. I think objectively it looks good. It's just a shame there's not too much more play with the amount you can tilt the turret up and down. And I do find there's sort of like a spring to the build when you do push down or sort of put a minifigure on there or anything like that. The whole build sort of sags and bends, and that trans clear piece that's meant to prop it up underneath is kind of useless as it doesn't touch the floor and kind of just hovers there. If you display it the way it's actually meant to be displayed, it does look a little bit flat. However, you can bend the legs and put it up into this sort of pose where I think it looks a lot better. There's a spring-loaded shooter, which is cool, as again the sag of the build kind of makes it harder to press. You can obviously add another minifig over to the side as well, but it's a real shame he doesn't have any sort of control pads or anything like that. He kind of just looks a bit useless sat there on the side of the cannon. However, we're all buying these for the minifigures. We have 4 501st clone troopers. We have the 501st clone specialist with some nice blue arms. He has the regular legs that we saw on the regular 501st trooper, a slightly adapted torso with a small yellow marking in the upper right hand corner. These all have the regular clone heads, and on top they have the helmets exactly the same as the ones we saw in the 501st battle pack. However, they do have the new antenna holes that we saw in the 212 figures as well as Cody in the recent summer sets last year. Now, when there's no attachments, I don't like the way these look. However, these do come with attachments for every single figure, so I think that's a little bit better, and it kind of makes sense for these figures. We have the micro binoculars for the 501st specialist, which I think look really good. Each battle pack also comes with a spare one. You can see I'm trying it out on a couple of different figs right here. It doesn't work perfectly on these newer phase 1 clones from last year, as it is kind of loose and only really goes from the very highest position to the very lowest position, and there's not much customization with that. They could be a little little bit more printing on it, but I've got to say, overall, it looks pretty good. The 501st Officer has a nice antenna. Again, this was the fig that was slightly falsely advertised over on the box, as the antenna is actually in the regular hole. I mean, this was pretty obvious that it was going to be like that. However, it was weird the Lego sort of teased it on the box. The only difference on the torso is this nice blue belt, as well as some nice printing on the legs. It is a shame we get these printed Karmas, but again, I think that's the way Lego are going with these, and I've got to say, I'm not really too upset with them. And the final two figures are the 501st Heavy Troopers. I really like these regular plain legs. Then we have a slightly differently printed torso. I really do like the way these straps look, and they also run across onto the back. But above the print on the back, you do have this nice backpack print, which I think looks really, really good. It's on a 1x1 tile attached to a neck brace, and for me, this is a step up with what they were doing for figs like Hunter, where they just printed the backpack straight onto the back. The helmet itself is pretty standard. Again, just has a couple more extra lines on the top for the heavy sort of marking, as well as a visor on there, and you do in fact get two of these figs in the set. Of course, battle packs being now $20 in the US, as well as $17.99 here in the UK. I've got to say they're relatively expensive. I'm definitely going to wait on sales before I buy any large quantity of these. Looking at it objectively, it's a decent battle pack. Did it take up the space for another Clone Legion that we potentially could have seen in this set? Possibly, but again, I'm happy with what we got. And then the final set, and strangely the only set over $20, which is crazy, is the TIE Bomber right here, set 75347. And honestly, it's an absolute cracker in my opinion. The build process was fantastic. I really enjoyed building it up. You start with the center section, building up the cockpit and the bombing section of the build, and then work on the wings in the final bag. And to be honest, it was just a super enjoyable process. The Vader's really nice if you haven't already got a printed armed Darth Vader. Really cool minifig. And of course, he is actually exclusive to the set with that exclusive head print. But I really don't know how they're ever going to improve these Darth Vader minifigs. They are really at the top of their game in my opinion. The Vice Admiral Sloane minifig, whilst being new, exclusive and pretty cool, I think falls into the trap that a lot of Imperial officers do of having these boring plain legs. I really wish Lego would change them up for a dual molded pair like you can see I've done here. Otherwise, a cool face print and a decent hairpiece representing this minifigure pretty well. However, I do think it would have been nicer to see her in her white uniform. I believe the torso print is also exclusive with some nice badges on her chest. Lego have also updated their TIE Pilot minifig, as there's a few different details in the printing, as you can see here compared to some of the previous TIE Pilots, such as the one we got in the recent downscaled TIE Fighter set. And overall, I think all those changes are for the good. The final fig's an Imperial Gonk Droid, and I've got to say I think this is the best Gonk Droid Lego have ever made. The use of the Imperial cargo crate on the back is fantastic, and other than that, it's a pretty simple rectangular box. The build though is a really nice detailed build, especially when you consider the price. It's actually really nice looking. The main section's really nicely tiled off with some nice curves, and I think the curve pieces capture the shapes really nicely. This side of the build is made up of the cockpit, where you can see you can raise it up nice and easily. I'm a huge fan of these quarter circle pieces, and I absolutely love the way they came together to make this nice cockpit. Inside you can fit a minifigure, and you can see there's a couple of nice details in there. It's definitely a sizable cockpit, and there's a couple of cannons down below. Every now and then the cockpit does catch on its way down, which is a little bit weird, but it shouldn't be too much of a problem. In the centre you have some nice greebling details, as well as two of these small missile sections, and those are great if you never want to see these small stud pieces again. Of course, the main function of the ship is to be a bomber. If you push down on the top here, you can in fact fire off the 4 bombs that you do get in the set, but basically just works with the help of gravity to drop these bombs on any unsuspecting victims. You can kind of see them poking out down below, and they can just be popped back into place nice and easily. On the front of the bombing section, you do get this nice printed dish piece. I think this looks really nice. It would have been nice to get one of the big spring-loaded shooters that go into this center section. However, there isn't a hole that goes all the way through, so that wouldn't have worked. The back of the ship is again nicely tiled off with these quarter circle pieces. I really like the addition of the nice red engines. Looks fantastic in my opinion, and I don't think they could have done a better job back there. And finally, as I mentioned, the last section is the wings. Each one is pretty much identical, just obviously flipped horizontally, so it can be kind of repetitive, but it's not too bad. You have the nice printed piece on the side that you see in multiple TIE Fighter sets, and that's the main build, but you also get an accompanying little small trolley, which holds 2 more of those spring-loaded shooters. You can see it's not clipped in at all. They're just kind of resting on this piece at the front, and you can add a minifigure holding onto the handlebars at the front. This is very basic, but it slides around nicely and has a pretty decent little look to the front of the ship. But I think that's a great way to round off a pretty decent wave in my opinion. Of course, this is less than half of the wave that's coming out of this half of the year. If you want to see all the sets we still got to come in March, May and June time, you might want to check out this video where I go over everything coming up for the rest of the year. And also, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that subscribe button and leave a like if you enjoyed, and let me know in the comments what your favourite set of the year so far is and which ones you've managed to pick up so far. Thanks for watching guys, I'll see you later.